Yo guys, welcome to the video. This is Josh or Milky, and in today's video I'm going to be going over the build that I've been playing for the past few days, which is a Frostbitten Gemma Frost Impact build. Now don't be too scared if you don't have Frostbitten Gemma yet. This build will work on Rehan, and you can see from the footage behind me, this build was very capable of clearing T8 maps, T8 Travelers, T8 Watchers, Keegan. I didn't attempt to Uber Keegan because it's more skill based and I'm not very skillful. But it was very capable. It's not the fastest mapper, but it was a lot of fun to make, and it does a lot of single target damage. It utilizes the ability to have multiple 6 links in order to keep up our Demolisher uptime. You do not have to animation cancel. The purpose of having 2 skills in this build is to keep that Demolisher charge uptime. That is why we're using 2. You do not have to animation cancel. I have done this on my phone, and I wanted to make sure that the builds I play from here on out are possible for you guys on phone. I think it's a bit unfair that I made a build that could only be played by people on PC. So the phone men out there, I got you. This has been a great build to play. It's been a lot of fun. I'll be moving on to the next one now though. But for now, enjoy the video. So coming straight on into the game, the reason I wanted to play this build was to try out the new hero, Gemma. She has a lot of cold scaling, a lot of added cold damage. She utilizes frostbites in order to penetrate more resistances with some of the talents. And one of the cool skills that I saw was Frost Impact. It's a Demolish skill, and if you aren't familiar with Demolish skills in this game, essentially, every time you have a Demolisher charge, you're going to do kind of a bigger version of your attack. So for example, this, where all the ice goes out, is a Demolisher charge attack. And then that little hit there, that's the one without Demolisher charge. So the trick and what we want to do here is have as many Demolisher charge attacks as possible, and there's many ways to do this. And the one that I settled on, being kind of the most budget friendly, was just having 2 of the skill. So with a very minimal amount of Demolisher charge recovery, you end up just being able to cycle through the skills, and you're always going to have a Demolisher charge. So that's one way of doing it. Of course, there are other methods. I will show those when I go over the gear, but we'll start off by showing you the damage, and it is important. We just cycle back and forth between them, and you end up doing a lot more damage. This can be done on phone. As I say, this isn't, I could just sit here and do this, and then the damage gets a bit crazy, but I don't really like the animation cancelling. I know I've kind of endorsed it in previous videos, but the more I'm trying to make builds, the more I realize how kind of bad it is for the game. So I don't want you to think this build is purely down to animation cancelling. I have done it, but this build is entirely capable without the animation cancelling. Now, as I mentioned with the gear, there is one mod that we're taking advantage of. This is not 100% necessary. We are using a steel stagnation that gives us a Demolisher charge on crit. And now, because this skill hits so many times, you can see all these numbers here, you have a lot of opportunities to proc this to refill your Demolisher charge. You can get some absurd amount of damage when you've got all your buffs up, and you just smack him. And I've seen numbers like I've crit for 60, 70 mil at times. So as I mentioned, Frostbitten Gemma is not essential for this build. What she basically does is she maintains a lot of frostbites on the target at any given time, which we scale with some of the talents we take. And also, you get like some additional damage per 5 frostbites. For a hero trait, this may look good, but there are lots of hero traits that deal, what is this, 26% more damage. This one is probably the cool one. You freeze yourself, you kind of become immortal for 3 seconds. This is cool to play around with. You can kind of mess around with an immortal build. Sometimes it seems a bit weird though, and I should mention you can actually avoid this freeze if you have chance to avoid ailments. So be careful with what infinities you're getting or what boot base you're using. I learned that the hard way. And then finally we have this chance to explode, but this scales spell damage, which we're an attack build, so this doesn't really do that much for us. I don't really notice it. It doesn't feel like a source of explode on the build, which is something that the build actually lacks. Now, one of the drawbacks, of course, of using 2 skills to ensure that we have the most Demolisher charges is that we essentially lose a lot of energy to put it into the other skill, and we lose a link. But I think that's a worth trade-off. So here are the skills that I'm using. We're using Frost Impact. Very important you get this as high level as possible. As you can see, I chose to scale this build with levels. So this is level 31, which means it does 560% of my weapon damage. You don't need to get all those sources of levels though. I'll go into that later. Added cold, freeze chance, quick return. This essentially gives us Demolisher charge recovery speed. This is very important because it makes the ice spikes come out faster. So what happens is the ice spikes actually come out a lot slower, as you can see. And that's bad because we want them to come out fast so they all hit at the same time, and we get a chance for those crits to reset our Demolisher charge if you're using that. If you're not using it, I'd still use it because the Demolisher charge recovery, if you're not using the hammer, is still essential because you're going to be waiting for longer between attacks. Then we're using Devastator, which means we do more damage to enemies at the center, which means you want to be right up close and personal with these bosses. You want to get right on top of them. Crit damage increase, and that's our 6th link on both of our frosting packs. I've crit rating on this one because I want to get that uptime on the crit strikes to return my demolish charges. You could easily change this for added cold or cold pen if you don't have the hammer corrosion. For leap attack, I have quick mobility and harden. If you have more energy, you can add in blind, perfectly fine. Bloodthirst, we've gone for soul focus, mania, and cost conversion. This is because we reserve so much mana, you want it to be on your life, make sure you do that. Bull's Rage, I'm using Death Will, so this doesn't kill us when we use it. It doesn't make us reduce it. It makes us tick over time. We take damage over time, but we don't take that big chunk that Bull's Rage normally does. In terms of auras, we're using Precise Frigid Domain, which is just more cold damage. Precise Ice Imbue, which it just adds more cold damage to the build, and we get some Shatter. And then Precise Erosion Enhancement, so that we're doing more damage to enemy life. Ignore the erosion damage and the piercing, it's not important. It's this 15% additional damage to life that we're looking at. Then we've got our cast on crit setup with Biting Cold and Fixate. This should look very familiar if you played my Whirlwind build. This is kind of my go-to way of getting Fixate and Biting and my Curse into a build. And then Magical Source attached to our life. As you can see, we are reserving a lot of life. This build is quite squishy, I will say. So we only have 2.4k life once everything's reserved. So we are quite a squishy build, I will say that. All the skilled links will be below if that was too fast for you. So now in terms of items, as I've mentioned, kind of the thing that makes the build really get to the next level is this corrosion, but I have put on the regular steel stagnation just to show you how it works without. You would just want to cycle between them a bit more slowly. So you just want to watch your charges. Well, you don't need to watch them. You'll get a feel for it, and you just click back and forth. It's not animation cancelling. You can, as I said, if you are so inclined, but you do not need to. You just press back and forth, and you always have a demolish charge. So the hammer isn't 100% essential. It just makes the build feel a lot nicer. Another big thing is the main hand. Kind of staple in my builds at the moment is you want a big fizz DPS main hand. So don't worry about the +3 main skill level if you're on a budget. If you're not on a budget, just buy one of these. Buy one already crafted. It's going to be much easier. But if you are on a budget, just get a high fizz DPS hammer. And then instead of this main skill level, you would probably want like flat gear cold. And then for the rings, we just have a lot of flat, some regain. This damage per focus blessing is pretty good. And then any resistances we need to cap us out. You do need one ring with -5 skill cost. That's why we have it here. It's quite important. Boots kind of generic in this build. You just want resistances, life, energy shield's fine. I got cold skill level. You do not have to get this. You can get some regen. You can get a higher tier of life. These are very basic gloves, as you can see. Just literally 5 stats crafted pretty easily, and then enchanted on life. The chest is just one I had lying around. This is the one that I made in the crafting video. What you would want is life, fizz damage, active skill level, any resistances you need. You do not need the strength. The strength is just because this was crafted for another build and I just used it for this one. Then another source of the levels, of course, is our amulets. We got +1 cold, +2 active. If you just have to get the +1 cold, it's fine. The levels is just how I chose to scale this into the absolute end game. The infinity, there are lots of options for infinities in this build. What I would say to get on a budget would be a focused strike infinity, which is you do more damage at the center of your AoE. It's a warlord talent. I've chose to go for this combination that I found, which was rushed, which is 35% additional damage, assuming I've moved 5 meters recently, and joined force, which means my offhand weapons do not participate in attacks. So I'm only hitting with that big fizz DPS weapon, and it gets more DPS from my offhand. This is a great point for this build. So if you can find one of these and you have a lot of currency, definitely look into getting those. And now finally, let's talk about our big talents. For trees, we went with Goddess of Knowledge, Arcanist, and Ranger. We went with Goddess of Knowledge because it gives us access to Arcanist, which is all the cold stuff. And we went with Ranger to give us further, so we're critting more. Again, we need those crits to reset our Demolisher charges. If you're not going with the Corroded Hammer, I would still definitely go Ranger. Still definitely some good points in there you're going to want to take. Cull, Fervor, Gravity, Impending. Incredible tree. But for our big points, the small stuff, it'll all be in the description. You'll have to go through it there. I'm not going to go over it in the video. We take Chilly, which is 20% additional cold damage taken by nearby enemies. We always want to be close by with how this build works. Burning Touch, we're immune to Frostbite, and we deal another 20% more cold damage. Great, that's 40% more cold. Then we've got Frostbitten, which is +1% cold piercing per 5 Frostbites. Extreme Coldness, another 30% additional damage. This is 30% more damage when we've got all of those 130 Frostbites on the target, which is very easy to achieve if you're using Frostbitten Gemma. Then Ranger, we went with Gravity, 20% more melee damage. Again, you can see all these more multipliers adding up. And then enemies within 10 meters take 6% more damage. per 0.25 seconds, stacks up to 5 times, so 30% more damage. Again, a lot of more multipliers on all these points we get, which is, it makes it really great to scale all that flat damage we're getting in that huge weapon we've got. So that's the big points. The little ones will be in the description. Now, very quickly, this shouldn't be too much of an expensive build. The most expensive things are going to be getting these +1 levels on all of your items. So the only thing I can recommend if you're on a budget is 1, drop the +3 on your hammer. Just get a high fizz DPS hammer. You can even go for something like a Fallen Snow, which gives you melee damage per frostbite, stuff like that. Could be an option. Your Steel Stagnation. If you don't get the chance to gain your Demolish charge on crit, again, just use one without. It's perfectly fine. And then for all the levels, you just have to drop the levels, basically. If you can't get this helmet base, you should be able to. These bases aren't too expensive. I am level 84. I would try and get one of these. And then the chest, you should be able to pick up a +2 active skill level chest reasonably cheap, or you can craft one yourself. Of course, it is an Ominous Ember, so it is going to be a bit more expensive, but again, you can just drop this for now and get some % damage or some more life or something. If you just want to get T7 viable, you do not need these active skill levels. When you want to go into T8, when you want to tackle the hard content, that's when you want to start juicing up the build with these active levels. That's the build. It was very fun to play. It was quite a surprise, actually. I didn't expect it to be as good as it was. The damage came out of absolutely nowhere. I think one day we were doing like 10 mil, and then I made some changes, got a bit of gear, and we were up to hitting 99 mil in a second on a dummy. So a great build. It scales very well. You can mess around with animation cancelling if you choose to, but if not, all the phone enjoyers, you can play it on there. If you like this video and you like what I'm doing, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe. You can also check me out at twitch.tv/MilkyBK. I stream every single day, and it's getting draining. So come and keep me entertained as much as I try to entertain you guys. You guys entertain me even more most of the time. So if you want to check me out on the stream, come say hi. I will be there. I can answer any questions you have. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.